I made this case in an article for DropSite last week that basically the coalitions, the groups of voters that are fleeing the Democratic Party the fastest are the exact groups of voters that where Bernie Sanders was the strongest. And it's because of, you know, what I just laid down about how he has a coherent narrative vision of the world. He has a coherent divisive politics versus this like dumb neoliberal laundry list crap that Kamala and Biden and all these people run with. And so he wrote out a pretty scathing indictment of the Democratic Party, which we covered last week, where he said they've abandoned working class people, which I think is, you know, undeniably the case. When you look at the way that the COVID era social safety net was rolled back under Joe Biden. Yes, they did good stuff on antitrust, good stuff on labor. That is not helping people's material conditions today. So he put that out, and Nancy Pelosi shot back at him. Here is Bernie getting asked about Pelosi's comments and responding. Let's take a listen.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Nancy's a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no, and that is what has got to change.
Some real talk there from Bernie. If you are your average voter, you really think the Democratic Party is going to the mat helping to help you? No, you don't. No, you don't, because they are, you know, way too beholden to the donor class. And we'll probably cover this tomorrow, but even Senator Chris Murphy put out a long tweet thread where he was like, you know what? Bernie had a point. And the fact of the matter is the reason that we attacked him so vociferously is because what he says is uncomfortable for our donor base.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, in terms of the accountability stuff, this one is almost like too insane to believe. We'll put it up there on the screen. Jamie Harrison,
oh my God,
the DNC, saying that Bernie is, quote, straight up BS. Biden was the most pro-worker president of my lifetime, et cetera, et cetera. He said there are a lot of post-election takes, and this one ain't a good one.
Yeah.
Which is really funny because, I mean, I don't know. You know, I have a weird thing where, you know, in some ways, Jamie Harrison is not necessarily wrong. Like, in terms of the individual, like, checklist politics. But that's kind of why I think culture and immigration did reign so supreme, because clearly, you know, that type of checklist politics is totally rejected, you know, by a lot of these multiracial working class voters who decided to go and to swing for Trump. Whereas I think Harrison and them are in this world where they think that they can laundry list, you know, box check things, and that people will just come along with them, when it's pretty clear there's a much bigger story that is at play.
Right, and it's also the fact, I mean, Biden is literally incapable of articulating what he did and laying out. I mean, because I think that the antitrust stuff, the labor stuff, like the, you know, all of that has been very solid. The industrial policy of the Biden administration, all very, very good, okay? Maybe if you had someone who was capable of selling that and of portraying it as like, you know, these are some of the ways that we're pushing back against these economic elites, perhaps it would have mattered more. But I think more to the point of the idea that you hear from liberals of like, oh, well, actually the economy is great under Biden. It's like, no, it wasn't. For most ordinary people, guess what? Inflation hit them really hard. Prices still are quite high. Just because inflation slowed doesn't mean the prices went back down. And under Trump, there was a huge expansion of the social safety net to deal with COVID. Biden had his highest approval ratings, and the Democratic Party was the most popular at the beginning of his administration when he was passing the expansive American Rescue Plan. The story of his administration vis-a-vis most regular people is COVID-era social safety net protections being rolled back. Child tax credit, gone. Rent forbearance, gone. Student loan debt forbearance, gone. All of these things that were incredibly important to people that really helped them, those are going away at the same time that inflation is spiking. So that's how most ordinary people are experiencing this. You know, I hope Lena Khan stays. I think that direction, I'm very confident she won't. But anyway, I think that direction is really important. The labor stuff, super important. But again, this doesn't hit right now today. So to pretend like, oh, this is an indictment of deliveryism or whatever, I think is just foolish. And to pretend like the economy was so great for regular people under Joe Biden is just a complete fantasy world. So in any case, you know, Jamie Harrison right now is taking a lot of heat because his stewardship of the DNC is a disaster. And so he's trying to blame shift and, you know, pretend like Bernie doesn't have any kind of a point here. But there's a reason why Bernie Sanders continues to be, even though he's quote unquote the furthest left in the Democratic Party, he continues to be one of the most popular politicians on either side of the aisle in the entire country with independents. Because it's not about this left-right spectrum. It's about top versus bottom. And that's something Bernie instinctively gets. And to your point, Saagar, almost no one else in the Democratic Party does. So, you know, we'll see where things go from here. You do have, bizarrely, a few people on MSNBC and CNN and Chris Murphy and David Brooks being like, hey, you know what, maybe Bernie had a point. But honestly, can I imagine them like going to war with their donor class? No, I can't imagine that. I think more likely what you're going to get is more of the Seth Moulton direction of like, let me just agree with the Republicans and their narrative framing of the world and capitulate on those issues, be a kinder, gentler version, hope that when Trump is gone that the next Republican candidate is less charismatic and we've got a shot against them. And, you know, that's what I think is the most likely direction for the future of the Democratic Party.
It's certainly possible. Yeah, let's go ahead and play the next one here just to give some more color on that.
Joe Rogan, very popular podcaster. He endorsed Donald Trump in the final days of the election. 4 years ago, you went on his podcast. You got a lot of blowback for doing that and for touting that he endorsed you. So is this the kind of example of Democrats perhaps shunning or vilifying people who don't totally agree with them?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Look, you can have an argument with Rogan, agree with him, disagree with him, but what's the problem going on in those shows? It's hard for me to understand that. So I think we've got to get, and clearly you have an alternative media out there, a lot of podcasts that have millions and millions of viewers. Get on the show. Disagree with you here. I agree with you there. I don't see a problem in doing that. And you're right. I got vilified by some of the Democratic establishment because I went on Rogan's show. Now a lot of other people are doing just that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was, it's funny too, because Dana Bash now, it's almost sheepishly being like, well, you got a lot of blowback for going on there. And he's like, yeah, there was something wrong going on there.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure a lot of that blowback was on her network.
Yes,
and she didn't have anything to say about it then. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's too late now, right? I mean,
too late.
You know, and Rogan is kind of the like, kind of emblematic of the Bernie to Trump pipeline. Right? And that's what happens when you don't have a coherent worldview. You shrink from every fight. You're terrified of picking big fights. You're terrified of divisive politics. Again, Donald Trump is like the most divisive figure. He is not afraid of picking fights. He's not afraid of being controversial. He's not afraid of saying things that don't focus group and poll test well. Like, take a lesson from that. Take a lesson from that, because that is actually the politics that are most successful. This was interesting. We wanted to show people this, put this up on the screen in terms of AOC's performance. So her district actually was one of the biggest swings in the country towards Donald Trump. Now, it's in the Bronx, very overwhelmingly Democratic, so it's not like he came close to winning. But there was a 24% swing, almost a 0.25% swing at the presidential level, and AOC basically stayed exactly where she was, which means you have this it's sort of confounding for a lot of the analyses that are out there, especially the like, oh, Democrats were too woke analyses, because AOC is probably one of the most woke members of Congress, right?
Yeah,
fair to say, right? Of all the Democrats that are out there, you know, she probably is most comfortable talking about transgender issues and, you know, doing land acknowledge. Like she does all that stuff. I think her language lately has been a little bit better and more accessible, but she definitely fell prey to like the very academic language, all of those things. And yet now there exist out there by the tens of thousands people who voted for Donald Trump and then voted for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I am bound and determined, Saagar, to find some of those voters and talk to them.
We are on a mission here at BP. If you voted for AOC in the Bronx and you voted for Donald Trump, please contact us and we will have you on the show. No troll. You have to, how would we have proof? What's the troll? What's the proof? You think people out there took pictures of their ballot? There's probably enough people out there who did.
Somebody has to.
Yeah, somebody. You got to have a proof about how you did it. We'll vet you. It's not just anybody who will be allowed on this program. But I'm very curious to see who those people are. I really am. As you said too, there's some acknowledgement here on MSNBC also around this, Krystal. Jen Psaki, let's take a listen.
There is sexism. There's racism. All of that is true. But I also think there is a real question I hope people start looking at about who people are listening to. In my view, there was an over-listening to and an over-lifting up of people who left Trump, not people who left the Democratic Party. The people who left the Democratic Party are the people who are going to win in the future. The people who left Trump, the never-Trumpers who have important voices and that is not the winning coalition.
It's funny for her to say that on Morning Joe in particular, because that is like
that's their
never Trump HQ.
Yes,
right there.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's who Joe Scarborough in particular. Literally. That's who he is. So she's saying that to his face, which is quite extraordinary. And I was just recalling. Remember back in 2020, Saagar, when it looked like Bernie would actually win. He was like winning Nevada, and there was no one who was.
There was
really
a 2-week
him.
period.
There was like a short period, and CNN kind of freaked out because they realized like, oh shit, this guy could be the Democratic nominee, and we don't have really anyone in our roster who is part of this coalition who can speak to it, who has any sort of access to it, whatever. And so they started booking myself and several other like Bernie type lefties, and then the second that Clyburn moves in and Joe wins South Carolina, Obama makes this move, all the candidates drop out, whatever. Like, obviously, I've never been invited back. And it is noteworthy that almost without exception, you can point to a few Nina's on there a few times, Mehdi Hassan's on there now and then, but by and large, CNN and MSNBC have completely locked out the Bernie left perspective from their airwaves. You are much more likely as a Trump Republican to make it on CNN than you are truly.
You are,
And you are certainly much more likely as a never Trump Republican. And those people basically only exist in cable news green rooms.
Yes, that's right.
So if your whole worldview is being shaped by the ideology of Joe Scarborough and Nicole Wallace, then you're going to come up with a very skewed understanding of what is actually making voters tick. And, I don't think it's an accident that the one ideology that really is basically completely shut out of any of these networks and completely invisibilized on any of these networks and smeared, dismissed, et cetera, is the one that maybe would actually threaten Capitol's bottom line. But, I expect any of this to change, even as you have a few people on there who are like, maybe Bernie kind of had a point. Not really, but I guess it's like, I'm glad to hear it, better late than never. But, it is where it is. Like, the world has moved on. People have evolved their political views. Certain things will be very difficult to, shake people off of. Like the coalition that was there for Bernie is not a Bernie coalition anymore.
They've moved on. That's
like
right.
The world has moved on. So to just try to now in retrospect recreate that from scratch, I'm just not even sure it's possible.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.